my one of my primary topics of my personal research in this life.
Mm-hmm. And that's so fascinating, and that's a very beautiful description as well. I've never heard astrology be spoken of so fluently in a way that I could really follow it. When you talk about how you know, you create energy patterns, I guess, and those are reflected. It's the entity's way of expressing itself through time, and so their patterns form fractal patterns.
Yes, it is so. And there are many, how to say, many laws, many rules, which govern how these patterns work, because they are not really so simplistic. They are sophisticated patterns, and we create, with these patterns, we create the tapestry of our life. And for an ordinary person, for people who are not very much familiar with the mechanics of this process, these patterns are activated through their thinking. When we think about certain object, or when we think about certain idea, or when we think, channel our energy towards certain intentions, these intentions, depending on their quality, they activate certain energies or certain patterns in our astrological chart. So our astrological chart is like a filter. It's a filter. It's a way to channel universal energy into the relative subjective reality which we experience here throughout time.
Mm-hmm.
You see, and the thing is that when we employ our thoughts, our expressed thoughts, to activate this mechanism, it is not the most convenient way to manipulate this mechanism. And, there is a more direct way to manipulate these patterns, and this is through direct meditation with the patterns which we choose. Then we would need to be aware of certain laws which govern these patterns, and we can choose those abstract energies simultaneously and try them in our life. And depending on how we use them, it structures our physical health, our events which occur with us, and it structures the fabric of our life.
My view of time, the simplest way I know is that time is just a way of organizing experience. In the same way that if you took a book and just made it one big long line of text, it's better to chop it up into sentences and paragraphs and pages and chapters and stuff, just to make it easier to navigate through.
Becky has a question.
And I want to follow up first with Nazar and say, oh, did you crack open a new way of thinking for me? Because I'm very into astrology too, and I know my chart a lot, and I'm it's like, oh, great, that is going to be a great way to do some meditations with my chart. And I'm assuming this is both the natal chart and the progress chart. Is that what you're... Is that how you work with it?
I'm using the natal chart, and okay. I experimented with several house systems.
Yeah.
I experimented with both Western and Indian astrology. And
right.
if you know, there is a difference between them. There is this Ayanamsha difference, 23 degrees between sidereal and tropical zodiac.
Yeah.
And it actually matters a lot. It matters a lot. And in my experience, when I meditate upon certain planets which are in my chart, and when I meditate, for example, upon zodiacal signs which are in my chart, I feel that the house distribution and the matching of the energies of the planets to the energies of the houses is correct when I use the sidereal zodiac. the sidereal zodiac. You know the difference between
Right.
tropical and sidereal zodiac. So the
Right.
sidereal zodiac works for me, and I employ the so-called three-party system of houses, which comes from the Indian astrology. And I also tried several other systems, but I was experimenting really for many years, and it seems for me that this system is the one which really corresponds to what I experience. So when I feel this pattern, what I feel corresponds to what is in the chart when I build the chart according to the system. And if you are familiar with astrology, the interesting thing is that actually what I do is this is really something quite new, because there are many astrology schools, both in Western astrology and in Indian astrology and in Chinese astrology. But so far, I was not able to find a significant school which would do the thing which I do. Because what I do is practically I turned the natal chart backwards. I am not being a passive receiver of what it offers me, but I am using it in an active way. It's like my gearbox. It's like my gearbox. It's like when driving a car, you know, the gearbox. And my astrology chart is my gearbox. I am switching my gears, and depending on which gear I switch to, the car or of my manifested life goes differently.
Awesome. We may talk offline sometime on more of this.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. And I did have a question for you guys. Briefly, I'm in Ohio right now, and I've read Seth Speaks decades ago, like many of us. And I remember one of the first things was that I could only read a few pages at a time, and then I would have to go to sleep.
I had to put it down and think about it, huh?
No, literally, I needed to sleep. It was so much, and then it was, I need a nap. So I found that reading Oversoul 7 trilogy brought so many of, most of the teachings through in the fiction story that I've read at least 6 or 7 times the trilogy. And so it's like, okay, that is a way that I got a lot of it, but I've been reading the books again now, especially during this, the gift of the pandemic, of having time and saying, what do I want to dive into? And so it's been this material. My question is this, I can't recall coming across it, but you guys will know, I'm sure, have something. If you're with someone that you love and is in your life, family member, and they have a habit of when you're alone, as soon as you're alone, they want to take you to some deep, dark, historical event in your shared past. And they just love to dig and get to the hurtful part. They feel that they're not trying to hurt anybody. They want to excavate. I can't do that. I mean, it's really painful for me. But I can't remember seeing anything in the Seth material that would help my frame of mind. I'm not trying to change her, because that's not going to happen and it's not the thing to do. But how can I change my perception of that situation and be able to maneuver it gracefully?
So is this the question you would like me to answer?
Anybody who's got it, I'm open.
Could you restate the question a little bit more directly?
When you're with somebody who has a deep desire to talk about negative, hurtful things, how can you gracefully get around it and shift the energy? And or do you just, end the meeting and go on?
Okay, I want to rip a page, believe it or not, out of Dr. Phil's book. It's probably the only thing I would rip out of his book. And it's his magic question. So how's that working for you? And in that spirit, not those words, ask questions. that are intended to convey that thought. So, for example, if somebody's saying they're really out to get me, okay, so ask them, what evidence do you see of that? And they'll tell you. And then you ask them another question, and eventually you're going to get down to, why do you really believe that? And where do you, okay, the real question is, how are you convinced you're going to be benefited by looking at it that way? Because that is the belief that drives their anger, fear, whatever it is that they believe this is a brilliant move, which of course it isn't.
I suppose I could say something like, why do you want to keep talking about this? And I would say 90% of the time something that has no answer. Like, why did they do this? I don't understand how this person could do this, and why aren't they? You know, that type of thing.
Well, one of the things that I've learned to do is to say, you know, let me think about that. I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
It definitely lets them know you've heard them, but
right.
you're really not going to respond to it, but you are going to think about it.
Right.
And that seems to diffuse a lot. Now, I don't know that I've heard Seth talk about it, but it sounds like I'm one of the newbies here. I've only been reading Seth for 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. I didn't find Seth when I was a teenager, and I'm 60 years old right now.
Right.
So I think that that's coming to me from a different kind of a teaching, but it does seem to work.
Yeah, well, that helps. Yeah, it sounds to me like you're saying that if somebody in your family, did you say it was your daughter?
No, it's my mother. Your
mother? Yeah, she's probably still she's probably still stuck in the traumatic place. She's still stuck in a traumatic place. And it sounds like you're saying that you love her and you totally get that she's still stuck in a traumatic place. But it's hard for you to have to join her there, you know, while she works through it. It's got to be just like, because you're not there anymore. You're ready to go. You're ready to heal. You're ready to move. But it sounds like it's so frustrating just to bear her pain with her, just to hear her be there in that bad place.
I can't change it. And I am way past all of that. It's like, why would you spend your time in a hurtful place when we can be talking about what are the kids doing
What's
now?
better? Well, I'll go so far as to say that you have to, your experience is of being frustrated and being ready to move is actually helping her. You are actually modeling to her what getting better looks like.
Right.
You're actually doing that. So you're doing a service to her by tolerating it. But I know that it's hard for you because I've been in similar situations. It's still a weight on your back. It's still because you actually have to, in a way, you relive it with her. And so not only is she going through it again, you literally are going through it with her.
Right.
And so every time she goes back to the memories and connects again with the pain there, you do too. So it's actually traumatizing you as well.
Right. And I feel that that's not, I don't want to do that to myself. So I really want to just not engage with her. And then I'm just sad because it's my mom.
And then you feel horribly guilty. Then you feel horribly guilty because you can't be that person that she needs you to be.
Yeah. Well,
in one of Seth's ESP classes that I had access to the notes from it.
Good.
One of the participants asked him, "How do you deal with somebody who's convinced that you're making their life miserable?" Which isn't exactly what you're saying, but it's close enough. And Seth's answer was 3 words: "Leave them alone."
Thank you.
And then she came back and said, "No, you don't understand. See, here's what's really happening." And she went on for a half an hour, and Seth, being a generous, self-sacrificing entity, answered her objections one at a time. But he really said it all in those first 3 words: "Leave them alone." Now, that's a little harder to do with your mom.
Yeah, but in general, it's what I believe is the right answer. But it's still sad, you know.
It is.
An old lady, and she could use some company. But it's
I'll tell you something else I've learned, too, Becky, is that you are making something. This is involving a change on your part, okay?
Yeah.
When you are making a change, a big one especially, there are lots of people who will try to dissuade you. Okay, they'll try to convince you that that's a mistake, that you're going in the wrong direction. And what I found is that if you stick to your guns and it's the right direction for you and you keep on going and keep on going, not the people who really, really object, they're going to be gone. You won't have to tell them to go. They'll just wake up, they're gone. And the people who complain the most may often be the ones who make the change with you. They're just making it hard to allow you to prove to yourself that you really, really mean it. And once you've done it, they're all with you.
Right.
You might find that out. And that's more common with family members than anybody else, because you don't dissolve those bonds just because somebody disagrees. So you might.
I appreciate you guys.
It's kind of like what Sean was saying about trying to tell her to be a good role model, to show her, to walk the talk, in other words.
Yep.
The better you do that, the more likely it is she's going to say, you know what, maybe I should be paying more attention.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, I went through this with my dad. And when I first started teaching astrology, he was not the kind of guy who thought much of that. But because I was teaching it in a college, that he could get behind. And so he
credibility.
Used to brag to his friends that, and a lot of them, when you say astrology, they thought he was talking about astronomy. So all of a sudden, anyway, but he used to cut out articles from the San Francisco newspaper on astrology and ESP and all kinds of stuff like that and mail them to me. But when it came to Seth, it was just too big a leap.
Well, it's pretty deep.
It was such a vast chasm between the Sethian belief structure and the belief structure that he spent his entire life with.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't even take the first tippy toe. And when I wrote my book, it put him in a completely untenable position, because either he had to not read his only son's first book, yeah, that's going to happen, or he could read it and say I was out of my mind, yeah, that's going to happen, or he could die. And he chose dying.
Whoa.
He died 2 weeks before the book was in print.
What
He hung around to the last possible moment.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, once he died, he handled it very, very well.
Yes, I'm sure.
Beautifully, as a matter
He
of fact.
understood it then?
Well, I'm talking from the standpoint of our relationship.
Yeah.
You know, I spent the last moment that I spent face to face with my dad was the best moment we ever had.
Mm.
And I remember I came to visit him in San Francisco, and as I was walking out to my car, we stood and hugged in a way we never had before. And as I was walking out to my car, I thought, well, I don't want him to die, but if he dies now, we made it.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Oh, nice.
And it took quite a while before he finally died, but that was, and a year before that, I had walked out of the same apartment under similar circumstances, and I had a friend that was riding with me and sitting in the car waiting, and I put my head in her lap and cried like a baby, because I'm killing my father. The farther I go in my direction, the more I stretch the relationship between us, and it can't go on that. We can't stretch forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't turn back.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And he can't change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, Ned, did it make you think? Did it make you ponder why you chose him to be your father?
Oh, I've been around that track many times. And I mean, for one thing, he was born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida, and he was kind of bigot that made Archie Bunker embarrassed.
Right.
And I didn't understand that for a long time. But when I began to understand it, I thought, gee, many Christmas, what planet are you from, you know?
One moment.
But he had some incredibly redeeming quality. I mean, he was incredibly charming. I would introduce him to my girlfriends, and after that, all I ever heard from them was about my dad. One of them went to to go to the Sorbonne and stopped in New York when my dad was there. I said, yeah, look my dad up. So they did. And he took her and her girlfriend that was going with her to West Point. He took them all over Manhattan.
Your women.
Yeah, and then they got to Paris, and she wrote me all these letters about my dad this and my dad that, and you know.
Ned, I'm absolutely blown away. I'm from Jacksonville.
Oh, is that right? I'm not entirely sure how it worked out. I know he was born in Jacksonville. I think he kind of spent his later formative years in Savannah. I know he worked when he was young. I don't know how old he was when he went there. And his sister, and he was one of 9 children.
Wow.
And he was the eldest. The youngest was also Ned. I was named after him. He died in World War II. And so his brothers and sisters all wound up in different states, mostly in Georgia, but also South Carolina, and on the eastern seaboard there. And as a matter of fact, there's a family plot in a cemetery not far from Atlanta, where my father and my namesake and his sister are all buried there. But I had to step over a lot of stuff with my dad. He had a lot of faults in that way. But on the other hand, he was a rock. I never ever needed him to be there that he wasn't there. Even if he had to fly 2,000 miles to be there, he did it.
Our parents are probably our best teachers in a weird way.
In one way or another.
Yeah.
Or several.
Well,
yeah.
They represent the lessons that we need to learn, right?
Well, I just want to say,
I just want to drop in too. Sorry.
My father was, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Go ahead, Audrey.
My father was emotionally not there in my life. I mean, he was present in the house, but he was also orphaned by the age of 6. So I understand, from where he came. He didn't know how to be. He didn't have he didn't have parents by, a very young age. So I've dealt with it. I've talked to him about it, but.
In the afterlife or in physical life?
No. In his physical life, yeah. He was a troubled man.
Great.
That's beautiful that you could do that.
Yeah.
I had to do mine in the afterlife.
I did it both ways.
Reconciliation is reconciliation.
Yeah.
No matter what happens.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of new people on now. Somebody else wanted to jump in and say something. Was that you? Oh, is that LX?
Hi to everyone. My name is Michelle. It's like Michelle, but without the M.
Michelle, okay.
And I'm from Mexico, and I live in Puerto Vallarta. I don't know if you know where the Pacific
I've been to Puerto Vallarta.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really? So whenever you want to come, I'm here for you when this beautiful quarantine let us. I heard about Seth about I think maybe about 2 years ago, and this is my daughter Victoria. Say hi.
Hi, Victoria.
Hi, Victoria.
She's so shy.
Teach her about Seth. That's the best thing we can do as parents.
No kidding.
Oh yeah, bring them up the Sethian way.
Yeah, and I just loved it. I started my spiritual journey about, I think, maybe 15 years ago. I'm about to turn 41 this year. But there were some things I didn't understand perfectly, and I started to listen Abraham Hicks teachings, and I knew Esther knew all of this because of Seth. So I started to read, and I wanted to I want to know everything about Seth. and that it's why I'm here, and I'm loving to hear all of you guys. Thank you, really, thank you for letting me be here. I'm just so happy to listen to all of you.
We're happy to have
We're
you.
so happy to have you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And about what Becky said a few minutes ago about her mom, I have a son that is 17 years old. So my situation, it's more or less with him when he started to, when he starts to tell me something like, Mom, why are you like this or like that? And you are always like blah, blah, blah. And I'm always trying to tell him, like, last time I told him, you know what? And I didn't know what I was going to say to him. And I said, I love you, and I know this day is going to be beautiful. So let's talk about beautiful things, please. And he was like, what are you talking about? But it ended. I mean, the discussion ended at that time, and I was like, yay.
So, are you listening, Becky?
Yes, and I do that with my son.
I mean,
and
I was thinking of your mother.
I'm not saying that that every day is like that, but that day I felt really, really well, and I really hope, Becky, this works maybe one day for you.
Right, and I do the same thing with my son, because he can be very curmudgeon. He can be very, and so I will help him change the subject, and he knows I will. He appreciates it from me.
He knows you're going to exercise your right to create your own reality.
Right, right. You know what he called me?
Help him create his too.
The other day he said, you know what you are? He said, you're willfully hopeful. And
I was nice thing to say.
It was, because we were talking about being blissfully ignorant, and he said, no, you're willfully optimistic or hopeful. And so I took that, and he likes it. He's different, but he appreciates me, and he expects it, and I am my true self with him. So
my mother used to accuse me of being willful a lot, but it was not willfully hopeful. It was just willful. And she did not mean it as a compliment. And she was right.
Well, I think being willfully hopeful is like being a practicing idealist. Like what Seth says, being a practicing idealist.
Yeah.
You can have the ideals, you can have the lofty idea constructions, but it's practicing, that brings it from framework 2 to framework 1.
I love the frameworks.
I love stressing and then going, oh no, I don't have to stress. I'll just put it in framework 2. And I do that with seriousness, because I know that, part of solving a problem is detaching from it. Because like Seth says, the same thinking that led to the problem is the same thinking that you're using to extricate yourself from the problem. And that is
how simple is that? That is so incredibly simple,
Right. Yeah.
Einstein said something like that once too. He said, you cannot solve a problem at the level at which you created it.
You created it, right.
Mm-hmm.
You got to step to a different level, then,
Mm-hmm.
So you can't create, if you create a problem in a room, you can't solve it unless you go outside the room.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's get a few more of these new people on. So I see Mickey has joined us, and I'll just say this. Mickey has actually spoken to Jane when she was alive.
Yeah.
We all speak to her now, but, Mickey actually spoke to her. And I see Helen
tell the rest
new.
of the story. Tell the rest of the story. It makes it even better.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, Nikki, tell the story of how you met Jane.
Oh, goodness. I have said this so much, I hesitate. I started out into understanding and exploring the world of New Age and occult started out with a Ouija board, just like Jane did. And I was living in Cuba. And it was wonderful. It worked, and it was wonderful. And things quickly progressed into direct voice. So I was kind of freaked out because I was in my late 20s. And so I was very new and very naive about all of that. I had a father who had brought me up as a young child with Paramahansa Yogananda and Autobiography of a Yogi and all of that kind of thing. So it wasn't unusual to me, just unknown. And when it went into direct voice pickup, it really did blow my mind. So after a while, I wasn't sure what I should be doing with it because you get a lot of different reactions from people. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, that's the devil. Oh, that, you know, whatever. So when I got to New York, I decided, I had read the Seth Speaks and Seth material and so forth. So I decided, okay, well, I'm in New York. I wish I could reach Jane Roberts and get some information. She's going to tell me what to do. And believe it or not, I was so shocked to discover that she was in the phone book. So I couldn't believe my luck, but I was young and impetuous, and it says, okay, so I'll dial up. And I spoke to her. She was very kind. She was very welcoming. She wasn't at all put out by the fact that some strange young woman called her. And she was just very, very helpful. She was telling me to just take my time and really be myself and let it unfold and see what it was really about. The main thing she was saying to me was to remain positive and to remain open and to allow it. If I could be allowing enough, then I could explore whatever the newness of this thing would be. And it really helped me a lot because I was frightened, and she said, there's nothing to be afraid of. Just go, you know, it's not a bad thing. You don't even, how do you know what it's going to be? Because you won't explore it. So if you open to it, open to being who you are, that was the main thing. Just be open to allowing yourself to find out what life you're going to have and let it happen. Let life happen to you. So over the course of maybe 3 calls, that was the gist of her advice. And on another occasion, I spoke to Rob, and several years later, I received a postcard from him and that kind of thing. But I was so relaxed and happy to feel that this person was so personable and private. She was your next door neighbor that you just knocked on the door and said, hey, you know, I wanted to ask you something. It was that kind of vibration, and it was absolutely wonderful. It launched me into a lot of other instances where I was studying the occult, you know, so that's what that was about. I mean, it went on where I studied with Rick Stack, and then I learned about Paralandra and the garden and, you know, all kinds of things like that. So, but that was what my experience was with her.
Many people that we've spoken to that live here and that visited the Seth house, same thing. She was just the girl next door. She was so sweet. She wanted to help everyone. But what I got out of what you just said, though, is really what Seth said about living in the now, in the present. That if you are in the now and you're here and you're focusing on that, the next thing is going to flow as long as you keep open to it. Yes?
Yes. Yes,
beautiful. Thank you so much.
I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, Mickey, you're from England, right? Now?
No, I'm living in England now.
Yeah.
Yes, now, because like I say, I'm from Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Washington, D.C., and I lived all my life in Jacksonville, Florida, until I left for boarding school out in New Mexico. So that's about the time, right after graduating in, high school to college level. That's about the time that I ran into Seth when I got to New York. So, but I'm really, I married a Yorkshire man, and so I'm living here in England.
Nice. I want to visit there someday.
Well, we would love to see you.
Oh, we would love to come. It's one of Oshara's very favorite places in the world, and I just haven't been there yet.
Ah, so she's been. That's nice.
Oh, yeah. Many times.
Well, I tell you this. You think for the first few times, you think, oh, how lovely. This is very nice. And, you know, it's interesting and blah, blah, blah. And the accents are a groove, you know. But after you've lived a long time and you start to really assimilate a different culture, there are things below the surface that you start to understand about the spirit of the place. And there's a really big learning curve of being an American who comes to live in Europe. And at first, when I came, my husband was teasing me because I'll tell you what happened. He took me to a place, I'm not sure if it was the day we went to Stonehenge or another place, and I was so shocked at how old, or maybe it was a museum, and I looked at the painting, and it was from 11 something something. Oh my God, that's just amazing. It's so ancient, you know. I said, and we have some antique so and so and so, and he said, antique. I said, yeah, you know, it's 200 years old. Oh, come on, that's just yesterday. He says, you don't have any idea what antiquity is. And I thought, oh, he's crazy. But the more you realize that this culture, a lot of the characteristics of the attitudes are because it's a people who have had centuries after actually millennia to come to those conclusions. They've tried it this way and this way and this way and this way. And then they draw the conclusions about how they want to feel or how they want to act. And so when he called us teenagers, you know, he said, America is just a teenager. It's not even grown yet.
Upstart colonists.
In today's politics, I have to agree with him. We're acting like spoiled brats. So it's amazing. So do come to England. I think you will love it.
I will love to be there. We did a hop, skip, and a jump from Spain to Edinburgh. So we were in an airport, but I never left the airport.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
We just flipped planes, and that was it. So I touched down on the ground, but that's all.
It's especially interesting from a new age point of view, because those things which are so new in America to the thinking of the culture, they're old hat. I mean, you know, the druids and the witches and the this and the that. People are right next door and they're just fine and they're going in and out of the grocery store like everybody else. And no one raises an eyebrow. It's all very, very, you know, there are traditions where people were into high magic and so forth, which is not a big deal over here. So it's just, you know, alchemy and so forth. So it's a very different way of relating to the now.
Beautiful.
And England is probably the country that we share the most in common with, except for perhaps Canada.
Yeah.
Which is like England light. You know?
I think we share more with actually England than we do with Canada in terms of emotionally. I think
I could support that.
Emotionally, I think.
Yeah. Although I remember I went to Canada many times when I was young, very young. But the first time I went there as an adult, I was taken by the fact that this is a foreign country. Yeah. It may look like America, it may sound like America, but it ain't America.
It's America, except it's very clean.
Well, this was back in the 60s or early 70s. But anyway, while we're at it, I wanted to say that I just posted a link on the chat window here on Zoom with a coupon that you can download a free copy of my astrology book, It's About Time.
Well, thank you so much. Everybody check that out.
It has a time limit on it, so don't let too much grass grow. But
I just started on it.
Can you put that on Facebook too, Ned? No?
I'm kind of reluctant to put the password or the coupon code on there because, well, you know, those hackers got in there.
Yeah.
I mean,
I respect that.
I'd be very happy to instant message it to anybody who asks.
Okay. All right. You heard that, everyone. All right. Helen, you're new. How are you?
Hi. It's good to see everybody. Well,
Hi.
I'm new to I've been sort of lurking in
Oh.
because I live in Hawaii now. I've been
Lurkers are
lurking
welcome.
for a couple of weeks after your time is over because it's early morning here when you're beginning to get together. But I'm not new to the Seth material.
Where are
I
you
started
from?
reading that, and I'm all over. I
Oh.
was an Army brat, so I've
Uh-huh.
lived all over the world.
But right now.
But right now I'm in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
So yeah, so I started reading the Seth material in 1972, and
My God, you
so,
got me by 2 years. I'm impressed.
Right, yeah, I'm an old timer, and we used to have a New Age forum on Computer back in the 1990s.
I remember that.
And
Yes.
do you remember that? Well, I was one of the folks who organized that and taught Seth classes online in 1992 and 3 and 4. And then I'm old. And you know, it's funny because I was doing some consulting work in, can't remember when it was, I guess in the late mid-70s, and went to Elmira. And I had been writing to Jane and Rob and all of that, sent letters, and actually developed a friendship with Rob. And then I went to Elmira and I said, I'm going to go and visit them because I'm here on business. And then I chickened out. So I did not go and see them. And I had written and I had, 101 questions about the Seth material and what should I do with my life, and I was writing them, waiting for a new book, saying, hurry up. And I didn't go to see them, but that night, I was traveling with someone else, a colleague. That night, I had a dream, and Seth showed up in my dream with this booming voice, and all of the 101 questions that I had asked, he answered with one word, and it was live, with a big exclamation point, live. And it filled this hotel room. It was so remarkable. And it answered everything.
Wow.
And I thought, here I am, the academic, data driven, the evidence, but live. And I realized that was all I needed.
That's it.
How did that make you feel? Did that make you feel like
fabulous?
I can only imagine that would make me feel like, you mean it's the purpose of me being here is to just be here and somehow I'm fulfilling the purpose of my life just by living it?
Yeah.
That's unheard of. I can't believe that.
And if we had Mickey, it's living now.
Yeah.
It's living now. It's value fulfillment.
Yeah.
Well,
and
like you could live any place else.
Come on, pardon me?
It's like you could live any place else. You have to. If you're going to live, you got to live now. I mean, there's no place else to do it.
Yes.
Well, there are lots of probabilities and
yeah.
lots of potentialities, but it's choosing from that place of knowing that whatever choice I make furthers me and furthers all that is. So I could be ditzy and that would serve. I could be extremely focused and, narrow and that would serve. It really doesn't matter. I just have to live. And that has been, it's funny, we were talking about this today because it's the first time I actually tried to join. And I had just been editing a piece on guilt, national guilt. And so some of the conversation that you're having is germane. It's right on the mark with what I've been writing about and I'm going to post on a blog later. So, here we go. It doesn't matter what you do. If I could have sat and continued to edit, or I could have logged on, or I was going to do a little bit of both,
I'd love to know about your blog.
Oh,
I'd be very interested in reading some of your writings.
Oh, okay, thanks. It's very simple. It's drhelenstewart.com. drhelenstewart, STEWART.com. And I'm on Facebook and all of that, and hang out in a lot of the Seth online community.
What is your doctorate in?
I deal with it. Actually, this piece mentions Jane. A lot of the times I'm kind of under the radar with the Seth material in my writing.
You better get out from under that radar.
I know, that was the subject. That was the point. Exactly. So thank you.
Thank you.
It is so nice to meet you.
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Absolutely.
Nice to be here.
So what is your doctorate in, Helen?
Sociology. That's what it was. They wouldn't recognize me, but that's what the degree is. I think I'd be kicked out by this point. It still is, you know, I didn't have a clue. I went to boarding school in France, so I didn't have a clue when I went to high school. I didn't have a clue where I was going to go or what I was going to study, and I kind of backed into sociology. And I find that, along with the Seth material, it ended up having been a very wise choice, because it looks at that intersection between personal and social reality and collective reality.
You must have loved the massive.
I loved it. That was my specialty, collective behavior and social movement.
Yeah,
so,
really.
You know, mass events and nature, personal, all of that stuff. Unknown reality.
So you're behind the scenes, Helen, shaping new thought.
Yeah.
Public opinion, but new thought, you know. You're
and you know,
to a conventional reality, to conventional wisdom.
Right. And just before this morning, I re-looked at something by Brene Brown on shame and on vulnerability. And having your story, Ned, I connected with entirely. I had very similar experience with family and basically shunned for being really weird very early on. So, but, you know, I had that moment with my mom before she died. And it was like that one moment was enough. You know, she said, this was, I guess, maybe 2 weeks before she died. She said, I wish I had gotten to know you better.
Oh, wow.
And that took care of everything.
Yeah.
And then we just sat for the rest of the night. I sat beside her bed. We were done.
I know exactly what you mean.
You know what I mean? Complete.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Complete.
Not that there wasn't more, not that you wouldn't have loved for there to be more, but that was enough.
That was enough. The love could be expressed directly. And then she got busy, you know. I had a partner who died, and I talked to a medium, and my mother just kept coming. She was dead, sort of. She jumped in, boy. She took over, and this Kim brought, and he said, I can't control this, you know, who shows up, and she talked.
Amazing.
In a very loving way.
Now, talk about your backing into sociology. I taught clinical psychology for a couple of years when I was in the Army. And in the office that I worked in, all the PhDs in the office, and there were sociologists as well as psychologists and psychiatrists and even a neurologist. And the book titles that were the subject of water cooler conversation, there were two in particular. One of them was by Dr. Albert Ellis and I forget his David Harper. Anyway, the book was entitled Rational Emotive Therapy. And the basic jumping off point was, it's not what happens to you that causes you to feel the way you do. It's what you tell yourself about what happens to you. Now, that's not quite Seth, but it's a giant step in the same direction.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And the other book that was being kicked around a lot was Cybernetics by Maxwell Malt.
Yeah.
And I don't know if any of you have ever read that, but he was a plastic surgeon.
Long time ago.
who got real curious about the stories that his patients told him as to why they wanted their face changed. And they were so disappointed because, you know, they were still them, only with a new face. And
they brought themselves with them.
Yeah. And so these were the people that I'm rubbing elbows with. And we were teaching psychology, sociology, and psychiatric nursing within the U.S. Army. And we were the only ones teaching it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only guy that had my job besides me was the guy that's sitting next to me. You know? In
Helen.
the whole Army.
Helen, Becky has a question. Is your book From Gut Feeling to Bottom Line? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So that's in the chat window.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah,
and
Becky put it in there.
Oh, thanks. It's about business applications of intuition. Ooh. So I spent 40 years in the university and then stopped being scared. And finally, after I retired,
there's a book there.
A book, and actually it's case studies, anonymized case studies, because in New Jersey, I guess I was an academic vice president at the time, and I noted, and I was provost of a business school, and I realized that when I would walk into businesses, I would always know what was going on all the time, and including the campus where I worked, and this was near Princeton and also in local businesses. And so it's at CompuServe back in '92, I put out a jingle and started, instead of just doing readings, individual readings, doing business readings. And so my first business client came from cyberspace in '92, and I still work with this person. And it's all about, I mean, the underpinning for business, for intuition of any kind, of course, is we're all connected. All time is now. You know, people say, and I know Seth has a thing about you can't predict, and, you know, a lot of Seth readers are talking about not predicting and not narrowing. But my focus is, if you, other things being equal, if you continue to do what you're doing now, this is the most likely outcome from among the field of probabilities that you're going to experience. And so I don't shy away from looking, because I see future and past as equidistant. So I would look and work with people on products or personnel or structures or partnerships or whatever. And that's what that book is about. I'm doing something, working on something now called Grits and Granola as an African-American woman, the grit side and sort of political social commentary, and then being very weird for an African-American woman to be doing all this metaphysical woo-woo stuff. So
no, we're about woo-woo.
That's the book I'm working on now.
We have a long tradition of woo-woo, original woo-woo.
This is true. And even that mother who thought I was satanic would talk about people sitting in chairs who weren't in the room.
Yeah. Well, Becky, how does Helen's work affect you? How does Helen's work interest you?
I do something similar with my clients, and I want to make it more an overt focus. So when I saw that, it's like, are you kidding? Talk about timing. Because my whole thing is wanting to work with people, that kind of heart-centered people. And I'm really good at like getting to the bottom of something with someone within like whatever time is allowed. Okay. So that's the other thing. It's like, we've got a half an hour. We will get to the bottom of it in a half an hour. You've got 15 minutes, whatever. Just really being able to ask the questions that move people when they're on that stuck spot and they're saying, I don't know where to go. I don't know how to make this. So for me, messaging, I have a lot of marketing background, technology background, and things like that. So, but I love strategic planning and sort of.
Do you hear what you just said, Becky, about the questioning? That's exactly what I was suggesting you do with your mom.
Exactly. Yes.
You're
yes.
obviously a very skilled questioner.
Right.
So don't forget
Yes,
to aim
I
it.
will make sure to apply it.
Yes, exactly. There you go.
And it is that's what I always say. It's all about the art of inquiry.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You can't get the right answer if you don't ask the right question.
Right. And it's that back and forth too in real time, whether it's face to face or not. But that brings out so many, it just brings what's inside of us out. So thanks for that.
There's that piece that, sorry to jump in, that piece on when Seth is saying you could read the whole newspaper from a corner.
Yeah.
That you could know the entire paper by just tapping, or your pinky nail, the cell in your pinky toenail knows all of you from all these different layers. I think this kind of work is we're approaching that concept, really using that concept of Seth to know more and offer more to people, clients, companies, whatever it is, by touching the corner of the newspaper and then growing out from there.
Right.
There's an old Buddhist saying, if you understand completely a grain of sand, you understand the universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's in keeping with Seth's concepts about every conceivable point of what we call the physical universe, containing within it the possibility to seed another whole universe. That's just the intense potential of all that is.
It goes beyond that. Every thought you have seeds a universe.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Whether you choose to experience it or not.
Right.
Now, Kara, we haven't heard from you.
Kara, sorry.
There you are. Okay. Hi, Kara.
Hi,
Kara.
Where are you?
I'm in Australia. I am Australian, and with all of this hullabaloo, I've had to come back to Australia. So I've recently been in Alaska and the Yukon, which was the last my last port of call, which was incredible and wonderful and amazing. But I want to remember to come back to a question about the families and parents and jumping in, as you said, Nick, jumping in on the merry-go-round into our birth, but also how that reacts and relates to simultaneous time. As I've reached a stage coming back here, of course, I'm once again involved with my family, whom I love dearly, and they love me. We have a lovely superficial relationship, but I have nothing else, almost nothing else in common with them. And so I was thinking with Becky, when you were talking about with your mum, I'm sort of going through a similar thing. And I did have the intense, and then I thought, well, this, I've been reading Seth since 79. And it's like, are you kidding, Kara? You're still getting caught up in this? And physically, it's
Gee,
really
I've never experienced that. Have you?
Yeah, right.
Is my nose getting longer?
Becky, what I've started to do, and this is once again very, I'm thinking it's superficial, but I literally take a step back so we aren't crossing over in our auric paths or so forth, and it's just a natural reaction. And I just concentrate on my heart. Now my mum is just talking about things that I don't want to be involved in, and that she doesn't need to be involved in either.
Right.
And I'm just concentrating on my heart and sending, love there, and love to myself and love to everything, but still trying to stay aware of her so she feels like she's got my attention. And then the conversation just seems to disintegrate into something else. So it's working for me. I'm not saying as a psychological that it's a good, strong, academic, true way to deal with it, but it's working for me right at this moment.
I think it's a very true way to work with it. Sending love to any situation is always appropriate, and it will. And I do thank you for that reminder.
I think that's an awesome way to react and to work.
Absolutely.
It's the most constructive way that I can imagine. You know, you're present and you're still helping. You're still engaged, but you're not being overwhelmed. You're not being contaminated, you know, by the negativity, and you're holding your own. And I can't think of any other better way to react.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
I'm really glad.
You know,
thank you.
This thought puts me in mind of something that I heard from Werner Erhard one time, who was the founder of EST, if anybody remembers that. And it was a training that spanned 2 weekends. And so one of the agendas for the first weekend was about love. And the homework for the next week was to, explore the people in your life that you were not happy with the love between you. And this guy came back the next weekend, and he said, "Well, I've never had my father has never expressed love for me." And he said, "Well, do you see him?" He said, "Yeah." "Do you talk to him?" "Yeah." And what Erhard said was, you can't say he doesn't love you or that he doesn't express love to you. All you can say is he doesn't express love to you the way you want him to.
That sounds fair.
And that is a really subtle but terribly powerful and important distinction to make. Just because they're not serving it up to you on a platter of your choice doesn't mean they don't feel it, and doesn't mean they don't do things because of it. It just means that you're being a snob. You want it your way, you know?
Your way. Yes.
I don't know if that applies here, but it seems to me that there's an underlying theme of letting your own prejudices get in your own way. And that applies in a lot of places.
You know, but there's the other side, and it's possible not to be loved by someone that whose opinion matters to you. And that too is a source of value fulfillment, because it's a frame of reference for deciding for me what my values are going to be or not be. So when you talk, especially when you were talking earlier about closure, you know, I told you the story about my mother saying, "I wish I'd gotten to know you better." But a week before that, she said, "You know, you're right. I never liked you." Both are true. Both are true. And so I'm not denying. One, what you're saying is, yes, I want to be loved the way I define or describe. Absolutely. It is also possible that people who are central in our lives are not central, not only the way I want them to be, but I think I drove her crazy. You know, I was a tough kid to raise. I was always asking too many questions.
Yeah. So
and
she
she
came
said,
by it honestly.
You're right. I never liked you, and I don't trust you. And in her, the last time I was there, she had to do something in a nursing home the last few weeks, only like 2 or 3 weeks, and she had to pay her phone bill, and she would not agree to let me take one of her checks and go to the bank and pay her phone bill because she didn't trust me. There was someone else locally. And I did not carry that. It's your, you know, I what I do is I understand. And at that time, of course, I was a little older. You know, I understand. And that's her choice. She gets to do with that what she wished at the time. And I didn't have to try to convince her that I was trustworthy. Both were true. Both stories were true. I didn't like you, and now, after she's dead, the medium comes through and says, "Oh, I see you were just trying to help people, you know, or I understand you better now." both are true.
So she got her wish. She just had to die to get there.
Whatever, yeah, in the simultaneity of time, because we're still connected. I wake up with all of those difficulties thinking that her and my parents daily. What other young Black girl gets to live in Japan at the age of 10, and in France for high school, and in Germany, and to travel in West Africa, and to get a PhD and a postdoc at Harvard? I mean, how many Black kids born in 1943 get to do that? Not many. And it was their value. They were born again Christians. It was their value for faith and their value for education that had me reading before the first grade. So now in my life, I'm 77. I wake up and I thank them. I find myself different times of the day, things that I notice, which are talents or interests that I have, or places I've been. I can't watch a movie without going, I recognize that spot. You know, and until I was an adult and started working on my own, they were the ones who showed me that world. Whether they loved me or not, or whether they did but didn't know it, or didn't but didn't know it, it doesn't matter.
But it was still your reality creation. You
Absolutely,
took it
yes.
and ran and used everything to your advantage and became the best you could be. That is such a beautiful story.
Right. And in the agreement, right, in the agreement to be born together, they offered you that, and that may be why you were willing to accept such a difficult life, being Black and female, because those you can't be a sissy with that.
That's right.
Well, you can be, but you're going to get crushed.
Yeah, you just can't be a sissy. I mean, you learn something new.
That's right. It's not for the faint-hearted.
That's right.
But, you know, but
Faint of heart need not apply.
Right. But it's so remarkable. I mean, look at the gift of that, to work with publicly traded companies, you know, to be literally the person that's beside the door, behind the door. And, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They are as much a part of that, of making me who I am, as all the things that I like to say, oh, I did that, I chose that. I like them, I'll play them. You know?
May I offer another slight angle on that?
Sure.
They didn't make you who you are. They helped you become who you intended to be, which is the person that we're talking to. I had an insight. Yeah, right. Check back with me later. Yeah. I had an insight some years ago about being in love, and what I decided was that, you know, people when love goes awry and they get all despondent and depressed and even suicidal, that because the other person doesn't love them anymore. I don't think that's it. I think what it is that we fall in love with somebody in whose presence we like who we are. And we don't know anybody else in whose presence we feel that way about ourselves. So it kind of puts them in the driver's seat. It's, you know, they got the only game in town. And when they go away, I can't feel about myself. I can't love myself that way anymore because you're not here. And so that when you look at it in a larger context, what that really says is that we're not looking for love. We're looking for somebody to accept our love. And so when we send them love letters, figuratively or literally, that come back unopened, it hurts.
If I may comment on that a little bit.
Go ahead.
I was listening to Becky's story, and if I may offer my perspective, these close relationships like with mother or with father or with very close relatives like children, brothers, sisters, or maybe sometimes there are other combinations in life when we are brought together with some person for some longer time, and due to certain circumstances, we cannot just go away. We cannot go away. We cannot leave that person. We have to stay with them for longer time.
Yeah.
And when this happens, there is energy exchange going on all the time. It's intense energy exchange. And this energy exchange always follows certain patterns. What I was mentioning earlier from my exploration in astrology, each person carries a certain energy pattern. And I am speaking now in simplistic terms, but generally speaking, when two persons exchange energy, the quality of this exchange depends very much on the combination of their patterns. So depending on how their patterns combine, their energy exchange follows a certain trajectory. So it follows a certain trajectory, and if you have a long-term relationship with someone, then it is good if you have the right knowledge, if you have the right feeling, to take into consideration this trajectory which this energy exchange will have. And it is possible to change it in certain ways. For example, from your side, you can change certain aspects of your energy, and this will change the trajectory. And from the other person's side, there is also a possibility to change it. There are passive possibilities to change it. For example, if your mother has certain energy, you can add to this energy another layer of energy by using crystals or gemstones. You can, there are certain crystals, if you put, for example, some crystal under the pillow where your mother sleeps, it will add certain qualities to her energy. But you have to be aware of the mechanics of this, because it's not very simple. You have to accommodate it with your energy. And from my experience, I can tell I have a very long-term relationship with my parents throughout my life. They have a lot of influence on me, and I have a lot of influence on them. And their worldview is not very spiritual. They are like more conventional people. They are not very much into spiritual matters. Like they would not normally be interested in books like that or from that sphere of interest. But there is a very strong and ongoing energy exchange between us. And at various points, I was trying to accommodate our energy distribution so that our relationship is more harmonious. And in my experience, this is very important because it influences both my health and the health of my parents. This is vital. This is something which builds our energy image. So this is it in a nutshell. But we can change these things. Everything you were being told here by other people who were giving you advice, this is more on the level of some mental concept. But there is a deeper level. There is a level of deeper, subtler energy. And if you go from this level, you can change the subtle direction in which your relationship with some close person that you are connected with very intensely, and in which direction this relationship will develop. Also, Nat was speaking about being loved, and why, for example, if you have some person that you are in love with, it is so important for you to stay with this person. And usually this is because, again, in terms of my experience with astrology, this is because there are certain patterns which are necessary for stability of each other. There are certain energy patterns which complement each other in such a way that, for example, if you have a pattern A, you need pattern B with certain characteristics to give stability to your energy flow, to give stability to your thinking process. And if you are missing this energy in some kind of relationship, you will be looking for it. For example, it is very common when there are breakups in romantic relationships and when people love each other, and when they have a breakup, and then somebody has a broken heart, and he will try to find some replacement for this person that was lost, that he doesn't have relationship anymore. So when you are looking for this replacement, you are always looking for a similar pattern which will give you this stability of energy flow.
Can I ask you a question, Maxwell?
Yes.
Because you lost me a little bit back, and that was, do you feel comfortable putting a gemstone under somebody else's pillow? You know, to what extent are you in those moments, you know, with permission or with understanding, but to what extent are you managing everybody's energy? You know, I'm thinking from a Seth perspective, instead of managing your own and letting other people manage their own.
I understand your question very well, and I actually faced it many times my own. So my question was always, to which extent am I allowed, and to which extent is it okay to try to manipulate or to change or to mold another person's energy so that that the results are best possible from my private point of view. Yes. So when I do this with my parents, I let them know about it, and it is my responsibility. So, for example, if they do not have the knowledge, the technical specifics of how this works, but I tell them, for example, I tell my mom, I think this will be good for your health and for our dynamics of our exchange. So I insist that you have to have this gemstone under your pillow. Then she says, okay, it's okay for me. Yes. But for example, if you do this without the other person's knowledge, it will still work. It will still work. So it is your responsibility. It is your responsibility.
Is it ethical? Is it ethical?
Well, this is a question for discussion. It is a question for discussion. I think it is ethical if you do it with good intentions. But you always take the responsibility. You always take the responsibility. For example, I will ask you this question: if you have a pavement on the street and it is winter and it is very slippery outside, it is very slippery. So a person who lives with you can go out, and because it is slippery, this person can fall down. Yes. So you take the initiative and you put some sand upon this ice so that the person won't fall, so it is not so slippery. So is it ethical or not for you to put the sand on the ice? What do you think?
With their knowledge and consent, with their ability for their own value fulfillment, to fall or not fall, to break a hip or not break a hip, to at least be an equal partner in the process. It seems as if you are the expert leading them into, you know, you use the word insist. You know, I insist on footing this. Frankly, it makes me a little nervous.
Yes, I see your concern. I see your concern, and I see the problem which you are speaking about. So I think it is always your responsibility. And from my point of view, generally speaking, our life is always connected to the life of other people. We always exchange energy. We always exchange energy. And our energy always influences the other person. So it's like if you have a certain energy set up within you, even if you are not doing anything physically with gemstones or with any other stuff, but you always have certain energy set up within you, and this energy set up within you, it is always influencing everybody around you, always influencing. So it is always your responsibility. You are part of the system. You see, it is a connected system and you are always part of the system. So it is up to you how you manipulate yourself. Depending on how you set up your own energies, you will influence everybody around you. It is like it's the engine which is always on.
I hear you. I'm just not there yet, but I hear you.
I agree that our energy does affect everyone around us. And if we intend the best for ourselves and the best for our energy around us, I think other people pick up on it. But to intentionally set an intention for someone else without their permission or knowledge, I think is intruding upon their free will. So I do things with intention, but I always ask permission. If there's an instance where I can't ask permission, which could be an illness or distance or whatever, I would always ask at the soul level that my intention be honored, welcomed, accepted. If not, that it just go to the earth or someone else that might need it. So I think that everybody can only fix themselves, right? I can't fix everybody or anybody, just me. And if I'm good, then hopefully the people around me are going to be good, because that's what I'm going to be drawing towards myself. So I'm with you, Helen.
I think you are right, but you also have to take into account that you are not a single individual entity which is independent from everybody else, and everybody else is not independent from you. You see, our ethical principles, Western society's ethical principles, are built upon a notion that we are somehow separate, that we are separate entities, that we have some kind of our own private territory or our own private identity, which no one else is allowed to intrude. And Western culture is built upon this premise that we have to respect this privacy. But the thing is that on the energy level, it doesn't work this way. It doesn't work this way. Everything is connected. You are a part of a very connected system. It's like a soup. It's like a soup where everything is mixed together. And your responsibility is always, what do you do with your part of the soup? Because whatever you do, whether you do something good or bad or something which is balanced or imbalanced, it will always influence everybody around you. So on a physical level, the question is, where is the limit? How far can you go? How far can you go? Yes, this is always the question. How far can you go? And I would say that physical violence or physical forcing of somebody to do something which you consider right is the limit which you should not cross. It is the limit which you should not cross. But on the mental level, there is always an exchange, there is always a drift. For example, now I'm talking to you, and everybody listening to me, they have some kind of reaction to what I say. And there, each of your mind is drifting in a certain direction because of what I am telling you. Yes, you cannot escape this. You cannot escape this. And on the deeper level, this kind of influence and this kind of drift is connect you with the whole universe, with the whole world. You are always connected. You have stronger influence upon people with whom you have close connections, and with people who are not directly connected with you, you have more remote influence.
I got to jump in here because this is all predicated
Sorry,
on
I've
one
got to jump out.
unspoken assumption, and that
Bye.
is that
Bye.
the assumption is that one person can jump into somebody else's reality without their permission. And I find that to be utterly and completely indefensible. My reality is my reality. The fact that you are here means I gave you an invitation, even if I forgot sending it.
On cue.
You don't like Mozart? That's my ringtone. But seriously, I have a very good friend, a former student, who has remained a good friend for 35 years. And she really is stuck on the idea that she will not suggest anything to anybody without being invited to. And my version of that is, excuse me, shut that off. Anyway, my version of that is, if you're in my life, if you have brought me into your life, then you're here for whatever you get, no matter what it is. And if you don't like it, then you leave. But if you don't like it, why did you invite yourself into my life? You know, I used to grapple with this, and when I discovered that perspective, I haven't grappled with it since. If somebody says they don't, you know, it's like when you were a little kid and somebody would grab your hand and say, "What are you hitting yourself for?" You know, it's absurd. If you buy Seth, if you don't buy Seth, then it's quite logical. But if you either you create your own reality 100% or you don't. And if you're creating your reality, how the hell am I going to come in and pee on your parade? It just doesn't work that way. And I get real tired of people trying to hedge their bets that way. It's basically dishonest. So you're fine if you disavow yourself from Seth, but it's not something you can have piecemeal. You either buy it wholesale or you don't buy it at all.
May I answer that?
Sure.
I think, yes, it is correct premise that we each create our own reality. It is absolutely correct. But you have to see that you are not just this body that I see on this camera. You are something more than this body. And your entity is larger than that. So when you say you create your own reality, you create something more than just some separate individual part which you consider connected with your body or with your individuality now.
Well, I have no problem with that, but I don't see how that addresses what I was saying. I mean, I see no conflict there. I mean, the bottom line is, can you jump into somebody else's life and do things without their implicit permission? And I say no.
There is no somebody else's life. Everything is connected. It's all one.
Well,
our individuality is an illusion.
I'm only talking about the way it is perceived by the individuals. And most people do perceive it that way.
And doesn't Seth really say that we are individuals and we do have our own individual personalities, and we retain those, even like Seth is an individual personality. Right. He is not Jane. He is not Rob. He is his own entity.
Yes.
I do believe that. You know, I started studying A Course in Miracles first, which says more like that everything mushes into one. And that just didn't feel right to me. When Seth's information came to me that we are a part of the oneness, but each part retains its own personality, its own job, that resonated with me. So.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with everything you just said, Kate.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ed.
That's chapter and verse as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, so that is also correct. We each have our own individuality, but our individuality is always connected with the whole of universe. So we are like an individual mirror of the universe. We reflect the mirror in our unique individual way. You see, we are a unique individual mirror which reflects universe in a way which is unique to us. But we are connected with everything. We are not independent from it.
Yes.
There's no way to question that. That's just the way it is.
I believe in the connection to it. I just don't believe it's my place to decide what another personality or individual entity should think, feel, do. That's up to them.
I agree with you completely. However, if someone is in your life and they complain about something you have done with respect to them, they're out of bounds. They gave you permission by showing up in your life or putting you in their life. You can't make somebody feel something. You can't keep them from feeling it, but you can make it easier or you can make it harder. And if you make it easier for them to get angry or upset or frightened, that's on them.
We should have time.
Well, I think it's a connected system. Everything is connected, and these permissions which we speak about, they are actually given. They are given on a deeper level. They are not given on the level of words which exchange now. These permissions are given on the level of very subtle energies, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work in such a discrete way as you are trying to put it.
I'm talking about the way it is perceived, not the way it really is. It's a combination of the two. I mean, I don't know. I just get really tired of people saying that you have no right to say things in front of somebody that might offend them. Political correctness is probably the classic example. Political correctness is bullshit. I am not responsible for what someone else chooses to feel about anything I do or say. That is none of my business. I can't control their feelings. They can. How am I to blame? You know, and what are they doing in my life when I'm going to do something like that if they didn't choose it?
Well, but you are influencing people anyway, whether you want it or not.
Sure.
You are influencing people, so it's not even that that you have this choice.
I'm not talking about the influence. I'm talking about the complaint. I'm only talking about the complaint.
It does depend on them. It does.
Yeah, it does.
It does.
That's my whole point.
You cannot say that you have to take the responsibility for other person's problems that they have with you. Yes, you cannot take that responsibility.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm sorry if we didn't seem to be on the same page there, because we are apparently. I don't know. I have a short fuse on that, because I've had a number of people over the years, actually nobody until just very recently for a long time, and then it came up recently, in the abstract. It wasn't anything I actually did. It was just somebody preaching to me about how that's supposed to work in their view. And I don't agree. I am not responsible for what somebody else chooses to feel or think or do.
Well, you see, my perspective, because everybody has his own or her own perspective, but my perspective is first, it definitely depends on the other person, but second, there is always room for improvement on your side in such situations too, because you may choose to change yourself or you may choose not to change yourself. It is totally your choice.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
And I know, for example, there are certain points which we can change in ourselves, which would dramatically change the reaction and the overall emotional comfort of people who are around us. But we are not obliged to change them just because we have to suit them. Yes, we have to follow our path. But the potentials are very broad. We have a lot of potentials of how we can change ourselves to accommodate our relationships with other people. And it is a connected dynamics. This dynamics is always it depends on both sides.
Well, yeah, it's a two-way street. And everything you just said, I really agree with, Nazar. I do. Well, I have to, because you're telling the truth, you know. Can't disagree with that. Why would I, you know? Again, I'm going back to the complaint aspect of it. That's the thing I'm focusing on, is people feel righteous that they have the right. And they have the right to complain. They just don't have the right for me to take them seriously. And I've also had a number of occasions with somebody who pretended that they didn't want to hear something or experience something. And then they do, and then they change their mind and say, thank you. So what they were doing is kind of playing, I'm going to run. You know, what's the old joke? I'm going to hide. Guy's going after the girl, and she's in the closet, and she says, I'm hiding in the closet. You know? And I've experienced that many times where people pretend to not want to hear it, but then when they do hear it, they're in a tell me more state.
I'm gonna let you chase me until you catch me. I'm gonna let you chase me until I catch you.
Yeah, right. There you go. That's even better. But I always did like that. I'm hiding in the closet. Thank you for adding that, Shauna.
Yeah. Hey, Audrey.
Yes, you've been very quiet.
Where's your cat?
I can get him. Out the window.
Okay. I'm always excited to see him when he makes his known.
I'll let him put in a visit. 1 minute, I'll get him.
Okay. I love Zoom meetings when you see cats go by. I'm so done when I see that. I'm just so in heaven.
That's funny. I always thought I didn't like cats, and I finally figured out why. It's because when you call them, they don't come like a dog.
No, they don't.
I kept expecting there'd be dogs, and they were always disappointing.
They hear you. They'll look right at you and decide.
Yeah, it's like, what are you, nuts? And then when I started treating them like cats, we fell in love.
See? Cats are a lot like women.
You mean the cat's in the closet?
Right.
Wow.
So tell me this, man.
Huh?
So I was born in July. So I'm a Leo.
Yeah.
So,
Me too.
Okay. Yay. All right. So what does that mean? Like, so do you? I'm asking this question in a really bad way because I'm breaking it up. But tell me what that means as far as me being a Leo. And oh, there he is. I'm sorry. Hello.
His name is Willie, and I had no idea. I didn't remember James. Wow.
No coincidences. Hello, Willie.
Probably isn't Willie too strong, more like Willie 15 or something.
He's a big guy. He's a big guy. Yeah. Oh, I love cats. But let me finish my question to you, Nancy.
Go ahead.
If I'm a Leo, how does that figure astrologically? And do you also include the families that Seth spoke of as far as being like a Samari or a Bornedum?
I don't. I have never given any thought to the connection that you're raising at all. I don't say there isn't one. I just said it's something that is, it's about as foreign to me as it would be to somebody you stopped on the street. They would look at you with a blank stare and say, "What are you talking about?" Well, I do know what you're talking about. That's right. That's the only way I'm different from the person on the street. As far as you're being a Leo, well, first of all, your sun sign is like at most 10% of your chart, and really less than that. It may be high profile, but it's still 10%. Now, chances are, if you have Sun in Leo, you also have, there's a 30% chance you have Mercury in Leo. It's going to be actually better than 30%. You're going to have, your Mercury is going to be in your Sun sign or the one before or the one right after. It never gets more than one sign away from the Sun. And so there's a pretty good chance you got Mercury in Leo, which would tend to reinforce your Leo. And also Venus has got about a 1 in 6 chance of being in Leo because it never gets more than 2 signs away and from the Sun. But as far as the Leo part goes, it's one of the best expressions I ever heard was on a comedy record of all things. It was very insightful. And they're talking to this stereotypical Leo and said, "You're a leader. You want to lead. You got a parade? I'll lead it." And it said they want to tell the truth, even if the truth hurts. Well, maybe not as it hurts. And that's the kind of out in front. Lucille Ball was a perfect Leo, especially the red hair, bought by the ton. And she was an actress. She was the ta-da, right out there in front of God and everybody, and loving every moment of it. And she was just a the poster girl for Leo in my book anyway. But it's such a relatively small part of a person's makeup. It's hard to overstate the inconsequentialness of it compared to other things. For example, I don't have any Scorpio in my chart at all, but I have a 5-planet configuration that focuses like a laser on Pluto, which is in Leo in my chart, and I feel like it's like a super laser, and all the energy in all these planets culminates and then is shot out of the Pluto in Leo, which is very Scorpio. So in that sense, I've got Scorpio written all over me in certain situations, even though I don't have a single planet in Scorpio. I don't even have anything in the 8th house, which is a Scorpio house. But
I have to say, Ned, you're like talking French to me.
Well,
it feels like
I get that. But when I talk about things like lasers, I think you probably understand that to some extent, right?
Oh, yeah. It was all the planetary stuff.
High energy laser. Well, the rest of it is just a way of linking that image to astrology. Mm. And if you don't want to link it up, it's no problem. But the bottom line is that you can get Leo stuff and Scorpio stuff and any other kind of stuff through the back door. Mm. I've got this really strong Scorpio type streak in me that without any planets in Scorpio. I've seen Scorpios that had so much in other signs that the Scorpio kind of got swept under the carpet. It happens fairly often. On the other hand, I know one person that has 5 planets in Scorpio. Now there is a Scorpio. and am I talking out of school?
I wonder who that is.
I mention no names. I know nothing. I see nothing.
Yes, I have 5 planets in Scorpio, and I have 3 other things right close up to it. So I have what's called a stellium. It's where you have a lot of planets in one spot.
Yeah.
At least 5 of them in one sign. And so that makes, Scorpio is an intense sign. But to jam a whole lot of it in one, it's unbearably intense. Yes. But back to the thing about Leo, I was laughing because whenever someone says to me they're Leo, the very first thing that I see is they have a mane. And
yes, that's why I, yeah, I mean, okay, so it isn't 12 feet high and red, but it's still a mane.
No, but it's, the hair becomes this first impression, oh, look at her beautiful hair.
The woman with dreadlocks down to her waist.
Yeah, that's some pretty Leo looking hair there. That's some Leo hair.
Yes.
And you too, Kate. I saw the wind blowing in your hair a little while ago.
Yep. Now, see, I've never followed astrology because my parents both passed away, and I have no idea when I was born. I know the day, but I don't know the time. So I've never pursued it.
There's a process called rectification. And the way that I explain it is this, because in other words, the time can be found. But the way I explain it is this. One of the things that astrology does is look at timed events and project what might be happening or coming. They're saying if this planet is here and it's in a relationship with the other one here, then we know that at a certain date, these things are likely to happen. So if that's true, anytime you have an equation, you have 2 things that are supposed to be equal to each other. Mm-hmm. So if the planets are here, they are going to speak of certain events that would happen at this age in your life. So therefore, you can look at where you are in your life and go back to look at when you were born in the context of, at this age, such and such happened. I was married at a certain age. I fell in love at a certain age. I went to a certain school at a certain age. I was in a car accident at a certain age. And you can look at the exact dates and the time of these occurrences and you can backtrack to when you must have been born.
Oh.
It's a little bit like reverse engineering.
Okay.
It's a lot of work.
I was going to say, it sounds like
a lot of work.
Extrapolating retroactively.
Yeah. What you end up doing is a chart for each time, like every minute,
every event.
You even if a person doesn't know when they were born, I say to them, do you even know whether it was night or day? Because that cuts off over 600 different charts you'd have to throw. Because, 1,200 different minutes or whatever.
Well, there is also something like it's called a solar chart, which you place the sun on your ascendant.
Yeah.
And assume you were born at sunrise and go from there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people hold a lot of sway on that. I studied chart rectification at one time, and I finally just kind of threw up my hands and saying, this is gobbledygook.
It's not so much that it's false. It's true that an equation has to be true on both sides of it in order to be an equation. However, you don't need, when you have an X on one side, you have to go through infinity of possibilities if you're going to go through everything that could possibly answer the algebra of that. So what you're trying to do is narrow down the list of possibilities so that as you examine them each, you're not trying to examine over 1,000. And that's why rectification is so expensive to do, because you're asking the astrologer to look at possibly over 100 charts or more, a lot more.
So, do you have a birth certificate, Kate?
I do. I even have the original one, but it has no time on it.
Time on it.
I'm pretty sure I was born in the wee early morning hours, but I don't know when.
Well,
which means you might have Leo rising,
I had an astrology student one time who we sent away to a computer service at the time, because this is back in the 70s when we didn't have our own personal computers. Anyway, we sent away to the service to do our charts. And when she got hers, it showed that she had Capricorn rising, and she was just absolutely outraged. I can't have Capricorn rising. I hate Capricorn, blah, blah, blah. And you went on. Well, it turns out, so about 4 weeks into the class, she came to class one day with a smile on her face to announce that she had the wrong birth time. She asked her mother, and her mother told her the wrong time. Then she got a birth certificate and found out that she was actually Aquarius rising. So people do change their charts.
Yeah. Well, and I was told, because I did try to look it up at one time, and the same flood from 1972 that, Jane wrote about in Nature of Personal Reality affected the paper charts where I was from in the Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania area. So there really is no record anymore. So I just don't have it.
Well, if it's not on your birth certificate, you're screwed.
Yeah, it's not.
About rectification. So in my experience, each person carries certain characteristics of their energy. And if you are experienced with how this works, more subtle mechanics, you can see when you communicate with a person for some time, you get an impression of their pattern, and this translates for you into certain features of this person's chart. For example, if I communicate with a person for some time, I have some idea in my mind what this person's chart must look like, because I see certain features there. But these features are very abstract, so it is usually difficult to guess correctly within some short time. It takes some practice, and it takes some communication with that person. And then if you try to somehow tune these features better, then you have to start making some assumptions as to what this person's chart must look like. And then you can try, for example, if your chart looks this way, then you can see certain objects in certain positions. And when you try meditating with this object, you will feel certain kind of energy. And if it coincides with what your chart tells you, then it is correct. If it doesn't coincide, then it is not correct. So there is always a way to find out, but it's a long procedure.
Yeah.
I did read a book one time on rising signs, and it was how you can spot different rising signs. And it actually made more sense to me than any of the books on rectification I ever saw. And the interesting thing is that the day I bought that, I was in Seattle, and I went to an astrological bookstore, and I was the only person in there, and I went around and looked at a bunch of books and brought one up to buy. And the clerk said, "You're Aries rising, right?" And I said, "Yeah, how'd you know?" She said, "They have one of those bells on the front door that just rings when you open the door." She said, "You rang the bell louder than anybody has all day." And I said, "How'd you learn that?" And she pointed me to this rising sign book, which I bought, and one of the best books I ever read. It was a little tiny thing. Yeah, and I have seen it applied. For example, Scorpios very often have very heavy eyebrows. Sometimes they have one big eyebrow. And the only person I ever met that had as many planets in Scorpio as you.
And you keep asking me what I'm laughing at, but I can't tell you because I'll interrupt. I'm sorry.
Anyway, the most Scorpio person I ever met had one big eyebrow. And what's more, his eyes were kind of inset and his brow kind of protruded. You got the impression of a lizard looking out at you from under a rock.
Oh.
And what he was a lovely guy. What an intense look he had, though. When he looked at you intently, it's like you knew you were being looked at. You really knew. Wonderful guy, great musician. But insight into Scorpio, he stood in the back of this big band, a 14-piece 40s big band. And he used to tell me on the sly, very secretly, "I really run the band. They don't know it, but I do, from back in the shadows." And he said it like he was, telling me some kind of spy secret. And interestingly enough, when he was in the Army, what did he do? He was stationed in Europe as a diplomatic courier. He used to carry suitcases around with handcuffs on his wrist, which is so Scorpio, you can't believe it. They love cops and robbers.
You gotta stop picking on Scorpios. You going in too hard on Scorpios, Ned.
Oh, I love them. I've had some really close Scorpio friends, but they are the really clear ones are something to be marveled at.
My husband's a Scorpio. So, yeah.
And he lets you talk like this, huh?
No. He's not bothered with me. He's out in this.
Send him to the store for ice cream, yeah. Well, then I'm preaching to the choir here. But,
that's a very intense relationship, Scorpio and Leo. My goodness.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mars, Pluto, and the Sun. Have mercy.
Well, and,
fiery and passionate, but unbelievably intense.
Leo and Scorpio are squared to each other at 90 degrees,
Mm-hmm.
And,
I believe it.
And the key word to the square aspect is challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's always a challenge. Doesn't have to be bad. Right. But it's, if one says, "Oh yeah," the other one says, "Yeah."
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe so. Maybe.
Not always. But
it's been 30 years, so we've kind of figured out how to make it work. I know what not to do to him. He knows what not to do to me. But,
so you've mastered the challenge.
I guess so.
Congratulations. Not everyone can say that. Now, Scorpio and Aquarius. Scorpio and Aquarius is a similar kind of arrangement. Now, Aquarius and Leo is opposition, and that offers all kinds of possibilities for wonderful things and also catastrophe. It just depends on how open you are and how malleable you are. If you're set in your ways and going to stay there till the last man, it's not going to work.
Hey, Ned. Miriam posted this way back in the beginning of the group. So she says, I was born cesarean about a week before I should have been naturally born because of a possible medical problem my mother had. It was in a large city in a hospital, and the surgery was scheduled for 8 a.m. And my father said he was notified in the waiting room of my birth at 10:30 a.m. Also, I'm a Gemini, and Ned said something about Gemini and objectification and would have heard more about that.
Well, I think what she's really asking is, when was I really born? Doesn't it sound like that to you?
It kind of did.
I mean, was it when I was supposed to be born? Was it when?
Somewhere between 8 a.m. and 10:30. So.
Well, my universal answer for that is really very simple. When was the umbilical cord severed? Because that's when you became a completely self-sufficient entity.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I think it is.
I would say it's when you start breathing. When you start breathing on your own is the time when it starts.
Well, theoretically, those two happen pretty much simultaneously most of the time. And again, we're getting into splitting hairs. Is it the first breath or the severing of the cord? Actually, technically, it's a severing of the cord, because if you don't start breathing, you die. So you're on your own at that point. You're no longer getting oxygen or nutrition or anything from anybody else. You're on your own. And if you start breathing, you live. If you don't, you die. And so that's my justification. Like I said, I don't know that that's right, but that's what I put in my book, and that's what I've been looking at, the way I've been looking at it for 40 years. Never had any particular reason to change it. First breath is a good one too, though.
So how much does it matter between 8 and 10:30? Like 2.5 hours of time.
Huge.
It is huge. Okay. All right.
Rising sign changes.
Okay.
What is it? I'm trying to remember the name. Is it 1 degree every 4 minutes? Is that right, Mazur?
It's yes.
Changes each 2 hours.
1 degree every 4 minutes.
So, it changes a sign every 2 hours. So
every 2 hours.
Yeah.
Starting with the sunrise being your sign would also be the rising.
Yeah. If you look due east at the moment of your birth at the horizon, the sign of the zodiac you're looking at in the sky, that's your rising sign.
Yeah. Yeah. In other words, if you are a Scorpio, you were born on a Scorpio day. If you were born at 6 o'clock in the morning, you were also Scorpio rising. So
depending
2 hours later,
depending on where and what time, what location, but theoretically, what time of year and
the sign would be different in 2 hours, and then to the next sign, the next 2 hours, and so forth around the circle.
First time I ever had my chart cast by a professional, it was wrong, because the time I gave him was Eastern War time, which was daylight time. And during the war, I was born in Detroit, Michigan. During the war, they extended Eastern time to include Detroit, so that all the Detroit war manufacturers would be in the same time zone as the New York and Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and stuff. And so that set me off. So I had Pisces rising instead of Aries. And I didn't know it. I was just barely getting into it. So I bought it wholesale, and it did, but it just didn't seem to fit, And I did have Venus in Pisces, and Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, was well placed in my chart. So I did have some Pisces stuff, but it just didn't set right. And then later on, I got the time corrected and found out it should have been Aries.
Miriam said, "Thank you, Ned."
You're welcome, Miriam. So apparently that did answer her question.
I think it did. She commented, yeah, and then sorry, I don't know, and then thank you, Ned. So those were her comments.
Sometimes I have had people who came for a chart, but they were unsure about the validity of the time they gave, because they said, I was born premature, I'm a preemie. So wouldn't my sign be the month that they were supposed to be born? If they were early, is that a valid time to do the chart? And especially after knowing about Seth and, reality and so forth, I was convinced, I still am, that you are born literally at the time you're supposed to be. To heck with what the doctor said your due date was.
That's
You
just a story.
You actually come at that second that is perfectly aligned with the vibratory path you're supposed to be on.
And being born early was part of your intention, because there's other things that go with that.
Yes.
Especially
it's all
if you're
part
very
of the
early.
reality you're creating. It's all.
And if you're a preemie that spends the first 2 months of your life in an incubator, that's a whole different way of starting life than most people.
It's part of your story. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's part of
And
the
a
reality
damn
you
important
created.
one. Damn important one.
Yeah.
Part of your story.
And not very accidental.
No. There are no accidents. There are no coincidences.
It kind of reminds me of one of the things in, I think it was Oversoul 7, where Joseph was being reincarnated, and he wasn't really sure if he wanted to go through with it. And Oversoul 7 says, come on, man, you got to make up your damn mind here.
Those books are wonderful.
I think I started reading the first one. I did not finish it. So it looks like.
Oh my goodness.
I need to get into those.
Oh, you got a treat ahead of you.
Yes.
Baby.
Oh, yeah. I have a question for you, Kate.
Yeah.
I am interested. There are very few of the Seth books that I don't have. But there was a point when those early session books started coming out, and that's the point where I was no longer getting them. So I would like to buy those books about the early sessions, etc. And I understand that you do have books that the website sells. But when I was looking the other day, I think that I want to know if I understand this correctly. While we're on lockdown and going through all this postal stuff, you're not mailing out orders, right? For actual hard copy?
We don't have the books. We don't have them. Rick Stack is still the man you need to see.
Okay.
Rick Stack, what is it? New Awareness Network, I think it is.
Yeah, something like that.
He is the one that publishes the early sessions, the deleted sessions, and the ESP classes. So, they're the only place you can get them unless you find them used on Amazon. So I contact Rick, and I know that he does, I think his shipping is very reasonable. He does give deals at times, and this might be one of those times. I don't know. I haven't gotten a flyer from him in a while, but sign up on his website and
I will do that.
Give him a call. You were in his class.
Yeah, I was looking at it at his site just the other day, and so I will go back and reacquaint myself with what's going on there.
That's absolutely where to get them.
I look forward to being in touch with him again. That's going to be interesting.
He also sells the other books that Amber Allen does. So he can get both kinds of books to you.
Okay, that sounds very good. I'm unfamiliar with Amber Allen. Who is that?
Aren't they the ones that do like Seth Speaks? And
they were the first publishers. They were the original.
Oh, I see. You're speaking of a publisher. All right.
Okay. Yes. Well, yeah. Rick Stack is that.
Okay.
Yes.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that's the only stuff missing, and I really want to get into that. Yeah.
Nice. See, I haven't read those either.
My very, very favorite is The Unknown Reality and The Nature of Public Personal Reality. But that unknown reality just took me away. It was a real challenge to take it in.
I love the Seth material. That is probably my very favorite one.
It's very nice.
It's Jane's perspective. It gives a lot of information. And I read that one third. So I did Nature Personal Reality. I did them just backwards from what they say you should do. I did Nature Personal Reality, then Seth Speaks, then the Seth material.
Wow.
And now I'm reading, and that's all. Those are the only 3 I've finished. Now I'm reading. I've read bits and pieces here, jump around, but I'm reading the Mass Events now. Still not finished.
Yeah. Now
I
that
was
one
going to ask you about that.
hard
You've
for
been
me.
reading that for a while.
I know. Well, I haven't read it in a long time. You know,
Well,
life
I'm
is
about to
busy.
start over from the beginning.
Well, I will get it finished.
Yeah.
Well, I remember those days
Wonderful.
of waiting impatiently for the new book to come out.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
And then just devouring it.
Oh.
That was a real hell of keep hearing that it's coming out any day, any day, any day. And
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
gotta wait for the mail, and you know, it wasn't like it is nowadays with the mail.
Well, my two other favorite authors were the same thing at the same time, Richard Bach and Tom Robbins.
Yeah.
And they never came out with a book as fast as I wanted them to.
Well, you mentioned one earlier, Ned, that is it's unbelievably close to my heart. It had a very profound effect on me. And I'm not at all surprised. I'm not surprised that Seth was in my life too. That was the book Initiation by Elizabeth H.
That was heavy duty.
That made so many things about what Seth was saying make sense as well.
Yeah.
But it really takes you a lot of other places.
But it covers over 3,000 years.
Yes.
Of reincarnations.
Yes. It was a very unique way to tell the story.
Beautifully
told. When I got to the oversoul stories that Jane had, both of those tend to play with your head in similar ways.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, coming from another dimension in oversoul and coming from another antiquity in initiation. And it just, studying Egyptology has been a very strong thing in my life. So when I ran into initiation, it brought the Seth and the New Age together with everything I was learning about the Egyptians. And it was unbelievably beautiful to see the two things speaking.
Well, and the thing about initiation that when it was over, I really loved was because it turned on the lights in the dark corners of some things that Seth talked about in terms of the relationship from one incarnation to another.
Yes.
And the relationship between entities who incarnate together more than once, you know, and showing it in that narrative form.
Yeah.
Especially crossing 3,000 years.
Well, when we start to try and grasp the concepts about counterparts, you know, a lot of people struggle with reincarnation. They have enough of a problem with coming back at all. But then when you try and assimilate the now being expansive, and then you're saying, all right, you have all these other personalities, but they're all happening at the same time. So it becomes this mental juggling act to finally reach a point where you realize not only are they there, but you can communicate with them. And even if you only do it in the sense of, I know that I'm being this particular version of myself right now. I do or don't like a particular thing. I want to turn it up or I want to turn it down. I choose to focus from a different standpoint. I pick a different me, and I will say, okay, you take over now and handle this because I'm choosing to do it differently. And it's amazing how quickly you can remove something that was a problem by allowing yourself to focus on a different you that's handling it. I choose to become an alternative version of myself. I knowingly change the path and the vector of my life right now. And I know that some other me might be doing something that I want very much right now, and I haven't been able to manifest it. So I will ask for help from that other me to help me create it for myself now. And we do all this juggling back and forth between what you want and what you want to get rid of, and you get help from the others.
And the amazing thing is that Seth says we do it effortlessly all the time.
Yes.
That's one of the biggest problems in getting people to accept it. Yes. Is that how can I do something like that and not even know it?
Yeah.
Because it's so damned easy.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. It's kind of hard to assimilate. I understand that because of what is considered the normal way of looking at things, that it would be very difficult to start to slide toward understanding these things. But once you do, you can reach a certain point where it is effortless to even embrace it. It doesn't have to be unknown to you that it's happening. You know,
Right.
effortless, yeah, it can mean that you don't know about it, but it can also mean that it's very easy and you're doing it on purpose.
Because you do know about it, right?
Yes, yes. And then it's really fun.
Then Seth would say, then you're responsibly creating your reality. You're creating from a
Yes.
position of knowledge and understanding,
that.
and
I
maybe
love it.
from, you know, looking into the future, you know,
Yes,
to
yes.
know, you know, what your future looks like should you choose a
Your
particular probable
expanded
path.
future.
Right.
Oh, it's wonderful stuff. It is. It does take time to wiggle it all in, though. You know, like a fish that's swallowing another fish. You know, and they have to kind of work it in. But it happens. It happens. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to chime in. Miriam said, this is for Mickey. Yes, I was born a week early, and I wanted to know how that affected the birth sign. You just answered that, Mickey. Thank you.
You're so welcome. You're
You know,
so welcome.
there is no accident. The people that show up and the people that are on and the questions that are asked and the right people are here to answer them. And you know, it's just a beautiful thing that we can get together and problem solve and work on ourselves and help each other work on themselves.
Yes. Yeah. And it was so nice having those new people tonight.
It was, yes.
Meeting other people is just wonderful. Ooh,
yeah,
I
definitely.
And every time a new person comes along, it changes the complexion of the whole group.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
You know, not totally usually.
No, but it enriches the diversity of the thought. It, you know, the thoughts expand exponentially. It's wonderful.
Well, you know,
when I think
Becky
about
and Helen
how
in particular,
many,
for example.
how many writers are on here, like it's
I was
incredible
thinking
to
about
me.
that before.
I mean, I keep, you know, I mean, it's writer after writer after writer. I mean, it is so beautiful that I think they're Jane's peers, you know, are now talking about Jane's work. So yeah, I'm no writer. That's not me, but I love it that you guys are writers.
Oh yeah.
I think you'd be even more appreciative, Kate, if you knew how few writers there are out there per capita.
Oh, and the writers that are here are published writers. Like
I'm not talking about published.
That's amazing.
Talking about authors.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's been so many that has joined us.
One who is conspicuous in her absence is Regina.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She let me know earlier. She's doing something with James Van Prague, and she said she would miss everybody, but she will be here next week. I also heard from Ron Card. He was unstable on his internet today again, so he hopes to try next week again. So. Yeah.
Well, soon enough, Elon Musk is going to let him tune in from wherever he is to high-speed broadband via satellite.
That would be great.
Possibly by the end of the year. So
we love when Ron comes on and he shows his beautiful collection. And I'm so sorry that we didn't get to see the Seth house today. Oshar was not able to connect. I do not understand why some people could and some people couldn't. I am going to redo it again. I'm going to try to make it easier. I'm going to go back to the old password, but keep all the things in place where people can't share the screen and so on and so forth. So I'm going to switch things back a little bit to try to make it easier. I don't know what else to do. Halfway through this, I realized I was so concerned with getting people on that I forgot to record it. so all of that beginning part where I was so flustered isn't recorded.
Never actually happened.
As soon as I calmed into this and started listening to what people were saying, I'm like, oh, let's record now.
Wow.
So yeah, so we have the best parts. I'm sorry if we, but it's on Facebook, so whatever.
But it is very, very nice to have you coming out of your own space tonight. That's nice vibe.
thank you.
Oh,
Very
so
much
this is right. So this is
Yeah.
my office. This is
Yeah.
my
It's a
office,
nice
and
vibe.
oh,
It's nice.
You look really
thank
comfortable.
you.
You look really
Yeah.
comfortable.
Thank you,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for showing us your painting too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was that's not recorded.
I didn't see that.
oh,
I
here,
missed that.
here, I'll show it to you. Hold on.
Live and direct.
Okay. Oh, wow. Oh, that's fabulous.
So
Ooh.
this is an oil painting, and a friend of mine had a vision, and he described the vision to me, and this is what I came up with. So it's two rivers that come together. One is teal and one is blue, and they form a single entity. So he was having a message about his twin flame. And this is the new entity rising or his guide, I guess. I guess she's bigger than a guide. But anyway, that is the new energy coming in. So this is something I did for him, and I had him take it off his wall and give it back to me so I could take photographs of it, and I have prints that I've remade. So
that is nice.
I don't sell any of my original work, but I make prints of them, usually 4x6s. If somebody wants a different size, I can get them. But yeah, I've got all my original work. Like these little ones behind me are just little prints.
Well, it's a nice vibration. It really is.
Thank you.
I also wanted to mention that 2 days ago, I received my package from you with my paint chip.
Yeah!
And it's amazing how it feels when you look at it and you realize what it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you feel so silly, but you realize that you're so tickled. This was in the Seth house.
I know it. And you know where Oshara sits every week, that window that shows the house with the blue bottles. That's where that came from, and I scraped it. I scraped all those windows myself.
So large. I'm so pleased.
Well,
you know what that reminds me of is a television show that was on in the 50s. I think it was called Science Fiction Theater, and one of the
I remember that.
Do you? Yeah. It was on contemporary of Twilight Zone in that era.
Yeah.
Anyway, one of the shows was about this guy who had invented this machine that you put solid objects into it, and you could listen to what they had heard.
Oh.
And one of the things that I remember was put a piece of lava in it that came from Pompeii.
Oh.
And he heard the screaming and yelling as the lava came over the town.
Ooh.
And I have never forgotten just the idea of if the walls had ears, what if they had a recorder too?
Yes, yes. Well, it kind of speaks to the whole concept of the Akashic records and all of that stuff,
Yeah,
I mean, it's that concept of everything is recorded in reality. In
highly, I think Seth called it highly codified data. Highly codified data.
Oh, yes,
so
yes.
technically it's still there. I mean,
I had forgotten that phrase.
If you just know how to decode it.
Yes, that's right.
But you need a very special decoder ring.
Yeah, I wouldn't know how to do that. I would not do that.
And I don't know what kind of cereal that comes in.
But I think probably souls are that, each one of us has all these different incarnations we've experienced as a certain soul. And I guess you're recording all these experiences you're going through so that you can collate the realities, the conclusions you're coming to in each reality. So I love that idea, especially since each thing is its own actual entity. The perspective of a table that's in a room that goes through several families being in that room sequentially. And what is that table aware of, or a brooch that's gone through several generations of being passed down. And it has its own awareness of that family,
Yeah.
Well, I love it. I'm so pleased. I am tickled. And it took me back to very young me in my 20s when I very first discovered Seth and all that awe and that, worshiping Seth. At first you were like, oh, Seth said this and Seth said that and Seth. And I was, as I said, I was a Seth snob.
Gee, I
So
never
to
did that.
actually hold that, surely, but to hold
Only
that
for the
in
first
my
20
hand,
years.
it just, it was quite amazing. I am
I'm
very, very
so
pleased.
happy.
I was too.
And did it come in good shape?
Yes, and I took, I was going to put it in a special place in the house, and then I realized, no, I'm putting the envelope and everything away for posterity.
Oh,
So it's all being kept. It's a relic now, you know. It will be with whatever else I will to anybody, but
we just love sending those to people. We just think that is the best thing we could do.
Well, and you know, it takes a special kind of sensitivity to even think of it.
Yes.
Oh, you know,
Seriously.
I gotta tell you,
following through and doing it.
And when we were scraping, Oshara followed everybody, and she's like, okay, this is from the windows, this is from the bedroom, this is from behind the radiator. This was Oshara's thought process and dream. She's like, Seth spoke in these rooms, and all of these paint chips hold that vibration. And so that was her brainchild. No, is that how I want to word it? But yeah, it was her thought process, and she cared so much about being in the room, and the thought of spreading the Seth vibration physically around the world.
Yes.
No, we've sent them to Australia and Europe and all over the United States.
That's wonderful.
Lots to Canada, some to South America. I mean, they're everywhere. And we are just so excited to have this. It's like, if we, you know, I know everybody I sent them to, so we could actually make a little grid and find out where they are. But
I gotta give me one of them decoder rings, man. That's all there is to it.
But it is beautiful, and I'll never forget the first one I sent out, because Oshara was sending them out to special people to ask for donations, and I said, there's this man that has been so nice, and he donated a couple of times, and I'm like, can I give him one?
Yes.
And he about cried, and he was so moved, and he sent me just the loveliest note, and I'm like, this is making a difference, you know. And I laughed at her about it at first. I really did, because I wasn't feeling that.
Yeah, who wants a paint chip anyway, right?
Well, and you got to know, this was like 2.5 years ago. I was very new to this, and it's completely different now, like the evolution that I've even gone through with Oshara's help. I mean, totally with her help. I would not be where I am today without her, and how she helped me at every book club understand every paragraph, and I would ask questions all the time. And so I always say I'm the newest newbie in this whole group that's ever been on.
Absolutely essential. You're one of our essential people.
I'm learning, and I love to learn it. So yeah,
it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and I am just so glad that you guys like to be here, and especially the ones that we're on here 3.5 hours again. You know, it's wonderful, and there's still people joining us on Facebook. I haven't been very attentive over there today. I'm sorry to all you Facebook people, but let me put a plug in. This will go on YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and give us a thumbs up. And we always do take donations, and hopefully someday the Seth House will be open to the public again.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
But, you know, for now, you know, a little by appointment. I think things will start opening up for not-for-profits. Right now, it's still, you know, social distancing. We can't do it. But hopefully that'll open up pretty soon. Like my business, I'm able to do healing work coming next Friday. So that'll be kind of nice. I mean, the second week New York is opening a little bit. So hopefully the Seth House, the same thing will happen. Yeah. Oh.
Bye, Kate.
All right.
Bye,
You taking off, Shauna?
Yeah. I'm hungry.
Right.
It's been, and I think it is time to say goodnight, everybody. Everybody needs dinner or breakfast, depending on where you live.
Yeah,
I gotta
it's
tell you
only
how much I love
12:30
you guys,
in the
one and
morning.
all.
Oh, thanks,
This is
Ned.
This is something I have dreamed of for 46
Oh,
years.
Yeah,
wow.
this is nice.
And it'll never
Historic.
stop.
It's historic, and
I
I'm
sure as hell hope not.
privileged. I feel very privileged to even be a part of the fact of the Seth House existing, that it's coming into existence. Oh, I'm so
It
pleased.
feels so good to be a part of it, huh?
I'm
It's
so
like you read the
honored.
books and you
I'm
understand it, but then you
so
can actually
honored.
be part of it.
And I think we all feel the same way.
And Mickey, you tried so hard to get on. Thank you so much. Behind the scenes, I was texting her and I'm like, please try harder.
Yes.
I'm stubborn. That's all. I'm stubborn.
There were people that tried and tried and could not get on.
I tried for about an hour and a half, just constantly.
All right. Well, I will try again. And
but I don't know why, because it was the right password. You know,
it was.
so I don't know.
I know. I don't understand it either. But you're not the only one. It told Oshar it was wrong. It told Jeff it was wrong.
Really? So that was it, the wrong password.
They said it was the wrong password. Yeah. So I
pulled her up on Messenger the moment that I started going through that, and I said, I just want to let you know what I'm experiencing.
Yeah, good.
And I can hear you. I do have it up on Facebook, but I'm having a problem getting into Zoom. So I just want you to know that I am sitting here trying, and I'm going to listen just in case, you know. So I'm just listening. It's okay. Whatever happens, it was supposed to go that way this week.
But you kept trying.
I'm glad it went this way.
Thank you for keep
that
trying.
is so weird from my standpoint, because all I did was just copy the password and paste it in the box. And
well, that's usually fine.
Yeah.
Well,
I was completely ready for it, and it you know.
You know, it's been something every week, and I think that first of all, Zoom has changed. Like almost every week, they're changing something because now the schools are using it. They had to make it more safe for the children. So we're feeling all those effects too. And, you know, it was new to me to begin with. So we're all learning. We're learning together.
It's a wonderful platform.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I thank you all for sticking with us.
Yes. And thank you for being there.
Well, we're harder to get rid of than that.
We'll be here again next week, 4 o'clock, same time, same bat time, same bat channel. We'll be here.
Okay, well, good night. We love you.
We love all of you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, Audrey.
Bye-bye.
Nazar.